All right, everyone. Welcome back to Unstuck. I'm your host, Ethan, and I'm here to help you get unstuck in life. Every week we talk about, personal development. We talk about how to get unstuck, how to regain control of your life, how to start creating the life that you're actually proud to live. And this week it's just me again. And honestly, I've been really enjoying the solo episodes. When I first started my podcast, I felt a bit impostery. Like I didn't feel like I had anything valuable to say. So I felt like I needed to outsource these conversations to guests. And while that was valuable information, and while I'm glad I had those conversations, I'm actually really enjoying the solo episodes and I've gotten a lot of good feedback. I feel like I'm kind of finding my footing and I want to keep doing solo episodes. So it's just me again this week. Hope that's cool. Hope you keep listening. So this week I want to talk about kind of a permutation or like a different angle of feeling stuck in life. And a lot of the times people feel stuck in life because they feel like they've lost control. Like they're in a car barreling down the freeway of life and their hands are off the wheel and they're just kind of floating and on autopilot, or like they don't even know where the car's going and they just don't have a handle on their lives. And so today I want to talk about how to regain control of your life, because I think if you can regain control of your life, then you can honestly get yourself unstuck. And this was something that really plagued me whenever I was 26, 27. I felt like all the decisions in my life that were being made weren't my own. Like every day I would wake up and I felt like the day was prescribed to me. And I hated that feeling. I felt like I was out of control. And so today I want to talk about the source of the inspiration for this episode. And honestly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the lengths to which this book that I read on vacation inspired me. So, this is the book. It's called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life by James Hollis, who is a PhD and psychotherapist. I taught humanities for 26 years and is a psychologist. So, honestly, if you're ready to start the work of regaining control of your life, then here's what you need to realize. Basically, the main takeaway from the first 100 pages of this book, and that's as far as I've gotten. So maybe a part two to this will be more learnings that I've gotten from the book. So, what he outlines in the first 100 pages of this book is that basically there are two selves within you. One is the deepest part of you, your truest self, basically like the most authentic expression of your soul. And the other is the unconscious self. And the unconscious self is ego driven. It's made up of the belief systems that were instilled upon you when you were a kid and how you viewed the world and how you were wounded basically as a kid. And it's this egoic system that's built up over time, and it basically runs your life. It causes you to repeat these negative patterns in your life, and it causes you to get the same outcome over and over again. So if you've ever heard people say, I don't know why I keep finding myself dating the same kind of people and having it end tragically in the same exact way over and over again. The answer is because there's an unconscious part of you rooted in like a very, very, very early version of yourself that was created whenever you were originally wounded as a child and your soul was wounded. And we create these defenses to basically survive and to protect ourselves and to protect like that very, very, very deep part of us. And so the second part of us is called the self, which is actually most, the truest, deepest, most authentic expression of yourself and your soul. And this is infinite, it's knowing. And in the book, he likens it to basically your unconscious self and your ego are a thin sheet of ice floating on an infinite pool. And the infinite pool below is yourself, it's your true self. It's infinite, it's knowing, it's wise, it's connected to source, it's truly the root of all inspiration and the root of everything good inside of you. And the ego is just the surface of that. And we operate from the ego day to day. And so it causes so much suffering because the ego is operated and created because of these unconscious patterns that we learn in early life. So if you find yourself suffering and you find yourself out of control of your life and feeling like the same patterns keep happening to you over and over again, it's because something is calling to be healed within you. It's because The universe and your soul are demanding more from you, and you're going to keep suffering. You're going to keep being in pain until you address this. You're going to keep repeating the same patterns over and over again until you address the root cause of these patterns. And I'm going to tell you how to do that later in this episode. So, I want to outline the problem of why it feels like your life might be on autopilot, or feels like your life is being decided for you instead of by you. And basically, it's this push and pull, right? It's the push and pull of the true version of yourself and the unconscious version of yourself. They literally are at odds at any given time in the day, right? You can feel the pull of your soul basically telling you that you want more in life, you want something greater, you want something bigger, you want to, go out and shoot your shot with somebody that you find really attractive, you want to go out for that big job, you want to start a YouTube channel, you want to be a content creator. But then that's coming from yourself, your true self, capital S, self. But then your unconscious mind comes in and tells you, no, best not to try that. We don't want to rock the boat. We want to stay comfortable. We don't want to like upset our lives. We don't want to face disappointment. We don't want to let people know what we truly want. And then we don't do it. So it's this constant push and pull. And you know this feeling. You know whenever you're being called to do something more important in life, but your ego takes over and your unconscious takes over, and it starts telling you, no, 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 don't do that. We're safe here. Why change things up? Why rock the boat? We're safe here. So, because of this, honestly, unless you're aware of this unconscious state of mind that's dictating the choices you're making in your life, it will make 90% of your decisions as an adult. How scary is that? Basically, the 6 to 11-year-old version of yourself that was wounded and hurt is making the biggest decisions in your life over and over again because they don't know any better. They're trying to protect you. And those same walls and defenses that they've built up are actually now affecting you in your adult life because they aren't serving you anymore. They're actually holding you back. And the only way to get past it is to go back and heal the wound. And I'll get to that in a second. So unconsciously, you've basically been chasing things that perpetuate that feeling of safety and that feeling of security. So basically what you're doing is chasing what's predictable, and your unconscious knows exactly what is predictable, and it chases those things over and over again. This is why so many people wind up in the pattern of dating the wrong person over and over again. It's because they're unaware of this unconscious, unhealed inner version of themselves and this inner child that is making these decisions. And they're just going about day to day life. Like, these decisions aren't their own, they are literally not being made by your conscious mind. So unconsciously, you've been pursuing things that are like reinforcing that wound, and they're protecting that wound that happened whenever you were 6, 7, 8 years old. So just like the body builds up scar tissue and calluses around injuries and frequent areas of use, your soul is doing the same thing. Your mind is doing the same thing to yourself. It's literally building up calluses and scar tissue around this wound that cause you to like keep taking the same actions over and over again in life. And it shows in your adult life, right? If the same situation keeps happening to you and keeps playing out in a negative manner, this is the number one sign that your unconscious self is ruling your life. And it's not your fault, right? This is all that the younger version of yourself knew how to do at that point. They knew how to run away. They knew how to self-soothe. They knew how to protect themselves. They knew how to like clam up and turn inwards and turn into themselves. And that was reinforced over and over again for however many years you've been alive. And so, of course, it makes sense that every choice you're making is basically serving to protect that wound and that most vulnerable part of yourself. And so that's why it sometimes feels like your life isn't controlled by you, or like your schedule is dictated by somebody else. Your life is being decided for you, not by you. It's because it literally is. It's being decided by your unconscious self. Like, your conscious mind, your waking mind day to day, and what you're doing in life is not being dictated by you and by the present moment, right? Like, you're not making those decisions from a conscious state of mind. You're making them based on your unconscious. Like, someone is literally making those decisions. Someone is literally making those decisions. So if you're interested in knowing more about how you can tell what part of you was wounded and what kind of wound that you have as a result of your inner child and like the deepest part of your soul being wounded at an early age, there are two main wounds. And the action that you're taking in your adult life can inform you of what kind of wound you have. And to be honest, If you don't resonate with these 6 actions, because there's 2 wounds, 3 actions for each. If you don't resonate with any of these 6 actions, it's because you're still walking around in a conscious state of mind, unaware of the unconscious within you that's making these decisions and making these behaviors possible. Every single adult at one point in their lives has done one of these actions or has implemented one of these tactics to protect themselves and to conceal that wound at its deepest level. But what you have to do is take full accountability for these actions. Recognize, and you're an adult now, so it's okay. Recognize that this wasn't your fault, that it was truly an outcome of an unconscious part of yourself that you are unaware of. Take accountability of it and go and heal whatever happened to you back in the day. Heal the wound that happened that is causing you to create these actions and these patterns and these behaviors in your adult life. And I'll tell you how to do that in the next part of this episode. But right now, I want to talk about the 2 kinds of wounds because it's really, really important. And it's probably the most important thing you're going to hear all week. The first is called the wound of overwhelm. So, whenever you're a little kid and you start getting the first pieces of evidence that the world is a huge, scary place and that you're not in control and that the world happens to you and everything just seems so big and adults have so much power and situations play out and you have no say into what happens to you and you basically have no control. You basically are overwhelmed and this causes a deep wound to the soul whenever you're young. And the 3 kinds of actions that play out in your adult life that can tell you if you have this kind of wound: retreating, procrastinating, hiding out, denying things, denying that you have a problem, denying that you're doing anything negative in life. And we're all guilty of this, right? Like, what are you putting off that you know you should be doing? Or whenever you get overwhelmed and you know, whenever someone confronts you and your first instinct is to go and run and hide out and go back to your space and crawl in a hole and go retreat back to what's comfortable. This is a classic sign that you have a wound of overwhelm. And I think it's really common and honestly one of the most common behaviors. And I personally myself am guilty of doing this in my adult life. And I can absolutely own the fact that I have this pattern, this repetitive behavior. The second behavior is that you're a control freak, that you try to seize control of every situation. And we can all attest to a time when we've done this, right? Whether it was a school project, if it's a relationship, if it's our, plans for our picnic at the beach today. Like, we've all been guilty of seizing control and becoming a monster of something and like making it completely our own and tying ourselves to this one thing and just being an absolute control freak. If you're doing this on a daily basis, this is another telltale sign that you have a wound of overwhelm. And the third way you can tell if you have this wound of overwhelm is by over accommodation to win affection. And this one's a bit nefarious because sometimes it can be conflated or mistaken for like acts of service being your love language. I've heard this before by a lot of people. They say, "Oh, I'm happy to do this for so many people because I love them so much and I'm just willing to give, give, give. And I love doing things for people." But it's a really slippery slope because this allows you to be taken advantage of as an adult. And this creates many negative patterns. And it's one of the leading risk factors or ending up in a toxic relationship. So if you find yourself over accommodating, going out of your way to people please and be accommodating as and be like go with the flow and be passive, this is a classic sign of wound of overwhelm. Next wound that happens to the soul, there's 2, remember. The first one, wound of overwhelm. The second one is wound of insufficiency. So this was whenever you were really young, you somehow absorbed the message that who you are as a person wasn't enough for the world. And this happens so often. And honestly, this is the more common one. And I think that it really is so incredibly sad because we learn this at such an early age. And then these behaviors follow us throughout our entire lives, through middle school, high school, college, adult lives. And sometimes people go their whole lives without realizing they have this. But I want to list out the behaviors for you. And I want you to recognize and be completely honest with yourself and recognize if you have any of these behaviors. So the first one is you avoid risk at all cost. You diminish the possibilities that are out there for you in the world. Whenever you're talking about your dreams and you say, "Oh, I want to be XYZ, but I can never do it." That is a classic sign that you have a wound of insufficiency. Whenever you're out at a bar and you see someone that you find attractive and you're scared to go up to them and you don't want to take the risk, and you're always playing it safe and you're diminishing the possibility of you winding up with somebody like that, that is a classic sign that you have a wound of insufficiency. The second behavior is that you overcompensate by seeking out fame, power, wealth, status. And a lot of people that fall under this category that do this behavior are what we would consider busybodies or busy people. And they love this, right? Like they love chasing after a goal, they love creating chaos in their lives. They love to do anything besides look inward and heal the deep wound that I'm talking about. So what they'll do is they'll pursue things that are like so difficult, so insanely difficult to achieve. But spoiler alert, whenever you wind up achieving those things, it never fulfills you. It never winds up being enough. So you wind up replacing that thing that you were chasing with another thing. And that cycle repeats until you fix this. And imagine how sad it would be to repeat that cycle until the day you die, right? You don't want to live an entire life being unconscious. Spoiler alert, behavior is seeking constant reassurance from others, being so deeply insecure that you need to get the reassurance and the approval of others to make even the smallest decision in life. So now that I've laid out the three behaviors of each type of wound, I'm going to tell you how you can actually heal these wounds and how you can start to bring the younger version of yourself that was wounded, how you can nurture them, heal them, and bring them into your current day so that you aren't making decisions from a place of unconsciousness. You aren't letting what happened to you with these two wounds, you aren't letting that dictate your life anymore. And that's how you actually begin to regain control of your life. Honestly, there's only one way to fix this. And it's really hard. And it's what we would call, quote unquote, the work in therapy. And it really is like the most difficult process that you will ever go through as an adult. It is painful. You have to process old emotions. You have to get in touch with your younger self, which for a lot of people seems so far removed. It did for me whenever I started this process. And it is truly the most mind boggling experience. But I promise that on the other side of that, you will come out clear headed. You'll come out living a life that you actually love, that you have designed for yourself, that comes from a place of a healed inner child that is expansive, that opens you up to all the possibilities that are out there for you. So, the way that you actually go about healing these wounds is by going back to the age at which they happened. Whatever happened, that first wound that you had, the wound of insufficiency or the wound of overwhelm. And you can access this by honestly tapping into any negative emotion you have as an adult and remembering the first time you experienced that. Remember the very first time whenever you were overwhelmed or you felt like you weren't enough or you were anxious. Try to tap into that. Remember yourself from like middle school. See if anything comes up and then see if you can go further back. See if you can go to like elementary school. See if anything comes up with these negative emotions, right? If something really deep and really sad comes up, that's a good thing. That means that there is something there that needs to be healed. Remember, if you're suffering and you're in pain, it's because something is begging to be healed within you. So, whenever you're able to go back to that moment where you were wounded and you were hurt, and you're able to actually get in touch with those emotions and have a release and bring them into your present day and truly process them, that's the first step in the healing process. And the truth is, a lot of us had several instances where we were wounded and had several emotions that came up whenever we were wounded in the first place and our souls were wounded. And so this is a repetitive process. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be an immediate fix, unfortunately. It's basically like going back to the site of an injury that never healed properly. So imagine you broke your leg and it never healed properly and the bone wasn't set, but your body your body put a lot of scar tissue around it, put a lot of muscle around it, put healed the skin, gave you some scars. You were quite able to use that leg again in the same way that you used to. Think about that having happened to your soul. So truly, it's like going back to a scar in your soul, opening it up, removing the scar tissue, giving it plastic surgery, sewing it back up, beautiful, clean, removing the scar tissue, closing the wound up, and having it truly heal for the first time since that injury happened. Having it, giving your body, giving your soul a chance to actually heal in the right way. So you have to process these emotions. You have to feel the hurt. You have to really experience it on the deepest level. And this is such an emotional process, right? These are really, really tough things that happened to you when you were younger, right? This was your entire worldview. So give yourself empathy and compassion whenever things come up. And honestly, I recommend going through this process with a therapist if you can, because it's a really vulnerable, really sometimes it sometimes feels like an unsafe space, but I promise you it'll be worth it in the end. But once you remove the charge, the negative charge from that emotion and from that scenario that played out whenever you were younger, and you accept it, and then you bring that version of yourself all the way to the present day, that's when you can start living a life where you're not making decisions from that wounded place. You're making decisions from an integrated, spiritual, holistic, expansive, beautiful place. And that's the kind of life that you want to live. And that's how you start creating the life that you can be proud of, creating a life that aligns with your dreams and your soul's most authentic expression. So I want to leave you with a quote today. And I think this kind of sums up the episode nicely. And it really is one of my favorite quotes that I've read in the past year. And it really moved me when I read it. And I resonated so much with it. And honestly, I'm like tearing up thinking about it because it's just so relevant and pertinent. And I've experienced this, right? I've gone through this process of doing the work. I'm still doing it every day, but I'm in a better place than I was even a few months ago. But anyway, the quote is, "What is denied inwardly will present itself outwardly, disguised as fate." So just let that sink in for a second. Just think about that. We think that things aren't in our control. We think that they just happen to us and that we aren't helping make those decisions and that we are just a victim of the circumstances that we're in. But what's happening is what you have denied or what you're unaware of, in this case, what your unconscious self is holding, those wounds, they're presenting themselves outwardly. They are dictating your biggest choices in life, and it's just unsustainable. So I just want to leave you with that quote and just know that on the other side of all of this work and this transformation is a reclaimed life and a life that you can actually start living for yourself. So, anyway, that's all I have to say this week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for making it to the end of the episode. And I can't wait to talk to you again next week. All right, bye everyone.